a bundle of confusion, yet it has a strange appeal. Did it all begin with him and the way he makes me feel? I like the way he makes me feel.
That was Melissa Errico, my 101st guest on Entertainment X. That was The Way He Makes Me Feel from Legrand Affair's Deluxe Edition album coming out November 8th, this Friday. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about everything she's done before that and everything she may do after that. It's a wonderful conversation spanning years. I'm not going to say many years. And she has been so gracious, kind, and generous with her willingness to share the lessons she's learned in her life and the interactions she's had throughout it. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did having a conversation with Melissa Errico.
Good morning, Vietnam!
But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
To infinity and beyond!
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
It's classified.
You talking to me?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I can't lie!
Expecto Patronum!
Entertainment X.
You never know what you're gonna get.
We're back. I'm Clayton Howe, and today with me is Melissa Errico. Melissa, thank you for coming here to the Upper West to have a conversation about life.
You're looking at me all dreamy-eyed.
Oh, we've had in 15 minutes before we started recording, we've already talked about so much and how much landscape you've traversed in theater. And I'm just really excited to get into it. I want to start with Michel Legrand, your relationship, Amour. This is coming out. So this episode's coming out November 4th. November 8th is the Legrand Affair release. You're going to be at 54 Below, 7th, 8th, and 9th, 7 p.m. Check it out right here in Midtown. So let's jump right into it. What was the initial meeting?
Well, Michel Legrand is somebody that that my father and mother exposed me to. It was Michel wrote music in the 60s and the 70s in movies that were considered very sort of sexy and European. He was a French composer who was very influenced by American musical films, like the Gene Kellys and things like that. Gene Kelly ended up being in one of his films. And he wanted to see in Europe if he could make musical films that felt sort of American.
Yeah.
And so he worked with Jacques Demy and he worked with Godard, and they were making these fun movies. But the most popular one, which hit the moon really, was called The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. They've tried to turn it into a musical a million times. Les Parapluies de Cherbourg. It's the most amazing French musical you've ever seen on film. It's bright colors and it's unbelievably curious and crazy. However, it also produced a song called I Will Wait For You. I Will Wait For You became a pop song that became very popular in America, and especially during the Vietnam War. It became a song, I Will Wait For You. The movie was set in the Algerian War, but this was, anyway, a very popular standard. My father was in Vietnam. This became a kind of anthem in my house, and so as I grew up, I was born in the 70s, this song was something my father, who's a concert pianist, used to play for my mom. So the chemistry in my house was really where I learned who Michel Legrand was. This is not music that everybody would know about, but this is music that has been recorded and played at that era by the great sexy jazz artists like Bill Evans and Sarah Vaughan and so on. and Miles Davis. This is the music of that time. It went on to be the music of Barbra Streisand. She took to his music and won many Oscars and sang The Summer Knows and the whole movie of Yentl. So it had a long Hollywood history, as well as an infiltration into the depth of jazz. So he's a very interesting artist. That my father was aware of this kind of music, though he was a classical pianist. He loved his music. So I learned it as a kid. As a kid, I just heard him playing this sexy. It is always sexy. His music is really sexy, affirmative, and somehow melancholy all at the same time. That's what makes Michel Legrand himself. Yeah. It's sensual, but somehow it's not a downer at all. It's really love-making music. It's really thematically free because he was classically trained. He trained at the Conservatoire in Paris and then became a jazzer and then became a Hollywood star. So anyway, to make this brief, this is a person that I met long before I came to New York City to star in a Broadway musical. It's probably my 6th Broadway musical or something. But Michel Legrand is a part of a different era and a really cool musical era of both French movies. It's called the New Wave Cinema, Nouvelle Vague movies. These are the hot movies that you think of when you think of French film. Yeah. The great black eyeliner, the super swank clothing. Those French movies, Michel Legrand probably did the score. And Agnes Varda's films, Godard, all the stuff you studied when you studied French movies in college, if you took one sexy class on French film. Yeah. So this is that stuff. It goes way back, and it's the cool clothes, it's the cool hair, it's the whole thing. That's what's called the New Wave Cinema, Nouvelle Vague movies. He did that, then he came to Hollywood, became more popular with Streisand and things like that. Meanwhile, the jazzers also took to him because they loved the melodies, and they could play with them. So all those hot jazzers, the Miles Davis, and Bill Evanses and so on. Yeah. That was happening simultaneously. So this man literally infiltrates all these mediums and never did Broadway. So by the time I hear about him, right. And I'm in my 20s and I'm living in LA, I've done a whole bunch of musicals. I was post-high society, which we could come back to because maybe people out there are also interested in the journey through different musicals and how you handle highs and lows. I've had some wonderful life experiences and some really hard ones. And one of the classic solutions, you have to realize I grew up in the theater of the 80s and the 90s where Godspell was happening, and well, not really Godspell, that was more like the 70s, but I saw that, but I barely remember it. I must have been like 3. Let's go see someone get crucified.
Oh, Lord.
But, the actual chorus line was running, and I saw it 17 times. I come from that time. Anyway, so one of the solutions in the 90s, after you've done a bazillion Broadway shows, which I had, and Tommy was running, and right. I was friends with all those people. I'm still really good friends with Sherry and with and Kurt and everybody that was a part of the Deutsch. These are people, Anthony Barilli and Michael Cerveris and my generation of the funky rockers, of the Tommy crowd. I was starring in My Fair Lady. Anyway, so what happens is after a whole bunch of shows, I'll be happy to tell you about them and the ups and downs. It was very common for an actor to go to California just to get out of here. So I went to LA.
For film?
You do film, to do pilots, you're good at that point. You do a bunch of shows, you have your highs and your lows, and you're good, and you just need a break, right? So you go to LA. So I'm talking late 90s. People are doing this now more fluidly. It used to be a little more radical. Yeah. It used to be like theater people going to LA. Not many did it, but some did it.
Never to return.
Never, and some never to return. Actually, I can think of a few. In fact, one lived right behind me, and she's really famous. I won't tell you who she was. Famous in the theater, and then never really became famous over there. Yeah. But made enough money and stopped. Basically. But so going over to LA could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. So I was in LA and I was working with Angelina Jolie in a movie called Life or Something Like It. I did a movie with Dennis Quaid called Frequency. I did 7 pilots. I worked with Spike Lee. I worked with Tom Fontana, Larry Charles. I worked with Jon Favreau. I worked
all the way around the block.
I worked with Ed Burns. I've since heard that George Clooney had 11 failed pilots. I think I had 7, so I was working towards 11.
Wow.
Because I thought when I get to 11, I'm going to hit one, right?
Magic number 11.
The magic number 11. So, I did so many pilots and things.
Yeah.
I did some of them here, but a lot of them there. Anyway, I was living in LA and I was working a lot in television. And I got my own television series on NBC with Kelsey Grammer called Neurotic Tendencies. And I was fired from my own show because they said my charm from the audition wasn't translating. And I have some thoughts about that too, because that was a strange experience. This, by the way, will come back to Michel Legrand, because I was in LA when I heard that Michel had a Broadway musical. That's
the tie into LA.
This is the tie into LA,
Right.
because LA was like another weird journey. So I'm in LA and I'm this kind of Broadway, something of a Broadway.
I was going to say Broadway baby, but not.
Broadway baby, darling,
that's
something
more.
kind of ingenue, something,
Yeah.
I'd done all these beautiful kind of Victorian shows, and a lot of shows were kind of got mixed reviews, or I got good reviews, or the shows ran a long time because things weren't as pressured commercially as they are now.
Yeah.
So you could run a little longer, and with a show that's moderately successful. And anyway, I'd done a lot of good work in New York, and I felt okay about it. But I was glad to be in LA on an adventure. But it always felt not phony, but it always felt like I was hiding as a Broadway singer there.
Okay.
I was always like in the trailer, like, yes, now I'm in this TV pilot. Like, this is, it's just like, I would hang out with Angelina Jolie and just be like, yeah, I'm a singer or whatever. Couldn't even get into it. She didn't even know.
Right.
She liked me so much, but it's impossible to explain over there when you're sitting in a trailer playing somebody's wife, somebody's girlfriend.
Yeah.
So I was on a show, for Larry Charles and John Favreau, where I was a landscape architect, and people could just see I was like bookish and smart and kind of cute and whatever, and like that they didn't care, like that I'm also able to sing, Brigadoon,
8 shows a week.
whatever.
Yeah.
They have no idea.
Because you have to do it once over
Yeah,
there.
yeah, and they don't know Brigadoon. They're like, Brigadoon, what is that? So I'm living, I'm living in LA, and things are up and down. The Kelsey Grammer thing did not work out. I worked for 4 days on my own TV pilot. I had beautiful long hair all the way down my back. I've always prided myself on this crazy hair, which is not very curly for you because it's a podcast. But the first day of work, we had a party, and Kelsey was like, I have this idea. We should cut your hair off. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I want to make you look like a French girl, like from a French movie, like a little smart French. So they cut 12 inches off my hair on Robertson Boulevard. I went to the hair salon and I let them cut my hair off. And so I went to the actual first table read with this like cute little hairstyle.
Yeah.
And I was fired on like the 3rd or the 4th day, but I like literally had they like cut my hair off. so upsetting.
My whole look's changed, and now
I like had no hair.
Yeah.
No, yeah, and the pilot never went. It wasn't like it wasn't that clear what made the whole entire project funny, and they replaced me with somebody else who couldn't make it funny, and the thing didn't go. But it was funny on its in the audition process. It was a kind of a fun plot about a girl from NYU who meets this older man, and I've often had boyfriends who were a lot older than me, so I kind of had a funny sense of how to flirt with an older guy, but not be gross, and not seem like uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it was kind of Kelsey Grammer's story with his, at that time, wife, who was a younger girl. And anyway, so I had fun with it. It was too bad it didn't go, but also it was really too bad I lost 12 inches of my hair.
yeah.
So then I had to meet Pinny, P-I-N-Y. P-I-N-Y is the guy who created hair extensions for the hair bands, like the real hair bands, like the heavy metal bands. So I go to this guy and I'm like, hi, now I have no hair, and I just got fired from my own pilot.
Yeah.
But I'm really a singer. I like having hair as a singer. So if I'm going to go back to singing at some point, I'd like to have hair.
Yeah.
So Pinny, you must look the guy up. He literally had walls. The walls were covered with all the hair bands, and these men just going with hair, like flying and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So he sewed somebody's hair into my head. It took all day and hurt like crap.
Was this just for living, or was this for an audition?
This was just because I had to start again,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
I had
okay.
to start my life again. So I got my crazy hair back.
Yeah.
And they sewed all this hair, and it took years. I did a couple other movies with fake hair. oh God, the thing hurts so hard. It's like they like braid it into the skull. Anyway, so I'm in Hollywood and I did another movie. I did a movie about a child abused kid, and I played a psychologist who helped her. It was a true story called Mockingbird Don't Sing. A couple other pilots. And then I get a fax from my Hollywood manager, and she says, oh, James Lapine, famous Broadway director, who wrote Into the Woods. Everybody listening probably knows who James Lapine is.
Or should.
Should. Look him up. James Lapine. James Lapine is directing a new Broadway musical. It's coming over from Paris.
Yeah.
And they're looking for a star, and they want to have auditions. And can you fly back to New York? I'm looking at the piece of paper, and it says Michel Legrand. Michel Legrand, the music by Michel Legrand. And I was like, this is like seeing, music by Chopin or something. It's like, is he alive? And I'm like, Michel Legrand, not even Chopin, like better, like cooler. It's sexy movie music.
I mean, it's also from your
Streisand
childhood.
stuff.
I mean, this is like...
Yeah, but it's also, what I heard in my house. I admire it. It's like vibey. It's like, it's just unusual. It's coming to Broadway.
Yeah.
And so I said, Michel Legrand. I turned to my Hollywood managers, this gal, this big fancy office. I said, Michel Legrand wrote a musical. And she goes, I know. I love her. And I'm like, oh my God, I love her. Michel Legrand is a guy. So I'm like, ugh. So Michel is a French word for Michael. So whatever. So this person doesn't know who Michel Legrand is. But they always fake everything in LA. Like they know everything and whatever. So I was like, okay. So I didn't correct her, and I was fine. Whatever. She's not my manager anymore. But people do make mistakes. But that was a harsh one for me because I was like fangirling on this fantasy of this interesting European guy who's literally worked with the most epic singers in the world. Everyone, Johnny Mathis, everybody.
Yeah.
And wrote hits, He was nominated for 15 Oscars, won it 5 times. The guy's a legend. Jeez. So Broadway had a music icon coming.
Yeah.
So I wanted to come to the prayer circle. So I got on that plane and I came and I auditioned and I did get the leading part.
How many auditions? Was this like a series?
I think I got it right away. It was a workshop first, so I think there was less risk. But no, I was perfect for it. My voice was perfect for it. My spirit, I loved it so much. It was a match made on earth. It was a match made everywhere. It was in my head, and so, which is interesting too. We should talk about that. How you imagine the things you wish for, and you can maybe bring them. I do believe in the power of visualizing what you want.
Like an affirmation.
I do believe in that. I also believe that affirmations aren't enough. You have to do the work, and you have to be realistic.
Yes.
But I am very, very, very sure that you need to have faith. You need to have a sight, Well,
you were manifesting this, Amour, well before you even knew it was coming.
Yeah,
that was like in your spirit.
It's a bit of a miracle. Yeah, in that way, life, was I had so many misfortunes, but that was one of my life fortunes, and that's one of the reasons why I'm reissuing the album. Michel Legrand went on to, hire me in that musical. The same season that I Sondheim came to it, and then I got Sunday in the Park with George, and so the seeds were planted for another titan that I would come to admire. But one thing that I learned about myself, in the last 15 years, now I'm in my 40s, I have 3 kids. I look back at the times where I wandered around. I think LA was a waste of time, but we do waste time. And sometimes it's okay to waste time as long as you're making choices and they're clear choices. I think you just have to get out of the world of maybe and just go yes to this decision, yes to this choice, yes to this trip to LA, this exploration of yourself, this class you're going to take, a side job or not take a side job, quit your side job, whatever it is, do it with clarity and do it for a while. I think everybody gets so muddled about what they're doing. So I think, in other words, there's a saying that, if you're crossing a river and you see stones in the river, you appear to be, sometimes if you're stepping on the stones, you appear to be going left and right, and you're not going straight. But actually, you do get to the other side somehow. So it's okay, as long as you just keep stepping. Just keep stepping. So, all right. So I did all these things. I went to LA and so on, but then this beautiful opportunity to come back presented itself, and I did see that. with like love in my heart. And I came back and I met him and I got that part. Planted the seeds with Sondheim. I did my first play with Raul Esparza, and we did Sunday in the Park with George, the Kennedy Center, and then came back and then starred in Amour after that workshop was over. That was probably the year where those two big relationships were planted. My dedication to Sondheim, which is now really solid. I did an album in his honor last year and spent the whole year preaching.
An avid pen pals. That's the main communication.
Yeah, Sondheim and I are pen pals. That's true, yes. And the letters are profound and beautiful. And he's very smitten with my writing in the New York Times, which started 2 years ago. I have always been a kind of intellectual person. And I started writing. The New York Times approached me 2 years ago to ask me what was going on in my life. And
what was the reason for them to approach you on that?
I think it was because, you know, if you jump to this more recent chapter, my life as a mom, I have worked less on Broadway, but I have been guest starring on some television and doing concerts. One of the guest starring things I did was on Billions. And I had to do a nude scene on Billions, which is ridiculous to do because nude scenes are not, they're not random anymore. You actually get a contract that says what side of your boob will you show, which boob, what part of your lower back. And so you have to literally go through all these different sections of your body and sort of agree or not agree. So there's clauses about the crack, this and this crack and this. I mean, it's unbelievably embarrassing. Or seen through a thing, a see-through. I'll show this nipple. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's a cleavage, a upper back. I mean, I was looking at this contract like, you got it. So I agreed to show my back. And did I agree to the side? I think I may have agreed to side boob. I don't know. But it all just struck me as so stupid and funny. Yeah. And I did an interview for Gotham magazine where I was like, okay,
about it.
Yeah. Where I was like, okay, so I'm in my 40s. I have 3 kids. And now I have like this whole contract negotiation. And now I have to like exercise and like spray paint my body to be perfect. And it's also silly to be a mom. And then when I got to the set, I was expecting the guy I was supposed to be having sex with to be like George Clooney, amazing. He's supposed to be an older man, a publisher, and I'm trying to get my book published, this character.
Yeah.
And it just turned out that it was Austin Pendleton, who's in his 70s and who was my teacher at Yale. And he was the guy who coached me to get the role of Eliza Doolittle on Broadway in My Fair Lady when I was 22.
Do we call that full circle?
So like literally,
oh
I'm
my
like,
goodness.
Eliza Doolittle was trained by this really classy actor. He's one of the great actors in New York City. He works at HB Studios. He's one of the icons of teaching as well. I had to sit on him and like do a like sex thing with him.
Right,
like
right.
It was, you know what? We survived, but it was so surreal. And we survived by laughing. We survived by knowing each other a long time. But I did this interview and the New York Times, I guess, read it. And then I wrote an essay about it for Beach Magazine in the Hamptons, where I actually was ghostwriting for a long time, just doing things on farm stands and things to help my friend who's the editor. And that essay and that interview, I think, just struck him as so funny that I had 30 years to retrospect. And that now I'm in this point where like I'm having love scenes with someone who was my teacher when I was starring on Broadway. Because the whole thing is all, you get older. And I guess people fear getting older, but you all out there, if you're also young listening to this, you mustn't fear getting older. You have to know that you're going to end up maybe in a nude scene with your teacher, or you're going to end up somewhere where you didn't know you were going to end up. But it's all okay. Like, you're all setting goals now, but your goals are going to change. And like life is going to unfold in weird and complex ways. And it's actually quite wonderful. It's like when you collect rocks, you know, one from every beach you've ever been on. By the time you get to my age, you have a shelf with all these beautiful stones, all these different shapes and sizes and memories, you know? That's what I mean. Like, so it was a wacky, that's a beautiful example of what was an actual wacky story, which is that I ended up in bed with my professor or whatever, but not really.
Right.
It was by contract. But the New York Times read that, and I think they just thought it was super funny, and they thought maybe I could put my views on other things out there, which I went on and have done.
Well, the self-tape one is great.
Thank you.
That one was really, even the way it starts though, texting your neighbor, my husband's away, you come tape me.
Yeah.
The link will be in the bio, but it's good. I mean, it was like, I was like, oh, that's like,
well,
that's really good
self-taping's
writing.
a real problem, It's a real problem for some people, and for other people it's really liberating.
Yeah.
But in the same way that like who are you going to do nude scenes with, like our business doesn't ask us what our opinion is of things. We have to adjust and do whatever we're told.
Yeah.
And somehow try to do it with humor.
Yeah.
And so self-taping, I'm like, my method of self-taping is because I live just outside of New York, but not far. I have neighbors everywhere. And it's like living in Queens. But I call my single male, this guy is not married and he has time, and it's like after 8, and I'm like, can you come over and tape me? And my kids are in bed, and it's all very like, it seems like we're going to do a porn movie in the basement, and so that's how my article starts. It's just like, you have time? And he's like, sure.
And then he's let down when he sees the way you're dressed.
Well, in that particular audition, I had other auditions where I auditioned for the Sopranos movie, and he came over, and I was like a sexy hairdresser. But then the second time he came over to tape me, I had to be a 17th century innkeeper's wife who's really, really like a truck. Like it said, she's twice as tall as her husband, and wrapped in unflattering layers of wool. These are like people who live in Canada in the winter, and they're like wrapped with like animal skin and stuff. So I wrapped as many things around me as I could to make myself look like fat and weird and intense, and like boots. I tried to make myself really tall because they were like tall as Janet McTeer, and she's really tall.
Yeah.
So I like tried to look gigantic, left, right, and up and down.
Yeah.
And my neighbor came over to do my like self-tape with me, and he was like, "Ooh," I had no makeup on because they said the character should look exhausted, and please don't let actresses look good. Like it's the direction to my agent. So anyway, so my self-tape, experience with my neighbor is not always a provocative experience for him. So anyway, that's I was just kind of goofing around with the idea that we all have to manage these self-tapes, and who's going to help us. And my 8-year-old kids, they can't read my lines with me.
No.
Because half the time the children are missing in the scene, or the husband is sleeping with the wrong person. And one of my kids going to be like, blah, 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 like saying the
or the profanity in it, or like if it's
the
a graphic.
profanity, or like I'm supposed to be upset. A lot of
Yeah.
times, at my age, when you're in your 40s, you're up for like your child is missing and you're upset. Like I get a lot of those. And your husband is in politics and he's betrayed you with another woman, or you're in politics and sleeping with a person you're not supposed to be sleeping with. But for the most part, your husband's done something either illegal or in his profession, and you're shocked, or he's sleeping with somebody. So those are those are the parts.
But along the self-tape vein, you've experienced the industry literally transform. We were talking about it before. You went from costume fittings, with cookies, to these self-tapes and this whole self-promotion of sorts, as opposed to just having so-and-so would like to see you now. Come in, please.
Oh, yeah. So your listeners don't know what we're talking about. What we're talking about is I was saying to him that I might be able to give some example of my own experience
whatever you can.
Of the 90s, of what it was like to be in the theater before it was. I mean, the good thing about the internet and the sort of and auditions being sort of the whole business now seems like everybody wants to be in it, and there's more programs, more people piling out of college and so on. But it was a little more tricky to figure out how to get in and how it worked, because there was no media. We didn't have media, so we didn't really know how to become an actor. It was print and rumors and a fantasy, and you kind of had to come physically to New York.
Knocking on doors.
Yeah, you had to physically knock on a door. People didn't even have Xerox machines at one point. I'm not that old, but there were times where you couldn't even get a script because you had to physically read it in your agent's office and then like go with the one piece of paper and then bring that paper back.
Yeah.
The sides, but you have to read the script in your agent's office. I'm not from that era, but that was the way it all started.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was saying that when I started on Broadway and so on, with the great fortunes that I had, like to star in My Fair Lady and Anna Karenina at the Circle in the Square with Ted man who had created The Circle in the Square. He was my director. Pat Birch was the choreographer.
He's a great guy.
Ted?
I auditioned for him for the program.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so I met him, and it was 2012 or 13. It was like right before he passed. I mean, it was a year after that he passed. But he's such a nice guy, and his background and story of creating it, upstate, bringing it down. Anyway, that's just a little addition. He's a really good guy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of real iconic people around, like Lynn Meadow from Manhattan Theater Club.
Yeah.
People who've been around forever. And I mean, I think we will, but I hope that the next generation of leaders, I think they do. I think most, just to keep those values. What is a theater company, and how to keep continue to support new work and keep the classics alive, and someone like Ted Mann, he was building something. So anyway, he was the director of my first Broadway show, and but all the way through all those years, I was telling you that when I had costume fittings, for example, they would serve cookies on layered plates and give it
was a party.
It was a party. It was an occasion. Things were it felt very interpersonal. You really knew the name of the seamstresses. You knew who was making your corset, and it wasn't such a rushed machine. I'm sure costume fittings are still very pleasant, but the business had a kind of courtship, and was smaller. It just was smaller, and. I do believe there was a kind of courtliness about it, when the producer come and talk with you, in a more sort of a formal way, open the door, for you, take you to the Russian tea room a little bit, have a nice lunch at the Russian tea room.
You get to audition in a theater or whatever. It's just more...
auditioning was a little more personal. The self-taping thing is harsh. There's just so much more consciousness of how we sell ourselves now, because we aren't selling ourselves just based on the eye-to-eye contact and the limited meetings that you have. Now we're being perceived constantly on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. Everything that you do, even the smallest appearance in a gala, is on YouTube. We don't prepare for these galas, and now all our performances are on YouTube and things like that. Sometimes that's good, but we have to look at them. We have to look at each other with some forgiveness that, like, possibly I messed up the words to Not Getting Married Today sometimes because I was asked spontaneously to do it. I was like, what?
And it was live, yeah.
Yeah, one time they were like, oh, can somebody sing From Company? And I was like, I know that song, but I mean, that's not a song you just do without thinking about it, which I did. It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. I don't even think I messed it up that much, but like Rob Berman was like quickly like trying to figure out if he knew it. I think he may have had to like look it up to like the word. I mean, we were being asked to do it spontaneously.
Right.
And these kind of things now are on the internet.
Forever. Yeah.
So things have really changed. And
how have you handled it?
How have I handled it? Well, I think...
I mean, well, it would appear very well.
I think I've handled it well. I think I've handled it well insofar as I think I've adopted an attitude that I hope will help other people too, which is that I think all of us, as much as we want to work in the community and see it as a community, you also have to, I think in this day and age, see yourself as an independent artist, which I've started to do. And you can make things happen for yourself, and that's what the internet is inviting. And I also think you should take that invitation. I've sort of had to do a few other things because I now have children. I think it's very difficult to be a female and give up that side of yourself and give up the experience, the human life experience of being a parent. Someone's got to do it.
How have you found that balance to work?
Well,
I mean, there's discipline, right?
Well, I've done it like I'm saying by being an independent artist. I've had to sort of simultaneously be a good mom and have a home and have a routine and know how to make lunches in the morning and know where they're going to be. And if they have ballet class, or if they're my daughter, one is a tennis player, if she has an injury, to help her through it and then get her back on the court and know where her tournaments are. So all the minutia of being a mom takes so much care and planning. And then we work in a business that also doesn't have a set course. None of us go to med school and then just get a job as doctors. We are...
And you're done at 5.
Yeah, we all come at this from different angles. There's never the right way to do it. And so you have to be super creative and you have to make order out of your career. So while I've organized and ordered my family, I've tried to get some order in my career. And I had to make choices in my career that I could also be a good mother.
Yeah.
And in that case, 8 shows a week again is not ideal, but I have worked at the Irish Rep Off-Broadway. I did a long run at for Finian's Rainbow, which went right through the Trump presidency, like right when he got elected, that horrible night. And there I was in a musical, which is the original Hamilton. It's the first musical where black and white actors acted together. It is about a white politician who is racist, and it is about it is a vision for laughing racism out of existence. If the leprechaun can be green and then lose his color, why can't the white guy become black? What does it matter? The color of your skin. And Yip Harburg was a great early example of what musical theater can do, like what Lin-Manuel has done for us, which is to keep bringing progressive ideas to musical theater. But I was in Finian's Rainbow, which is, yes, a retro show, but it's not that retro. And it certainly wasn't retro on the night that Trump was elected. And it became a hit. And so it ran and ran and ran and ran. And then I was well past, 5-6 months, and I was 8 shows a week. So I was a mom. So there I was. So I can actually do a short Broadway run. I learned. But I didn't.
I didn't know I could do that.
I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know my kids could handle it. But it started out, I think, as a 9-week run or something like that, 7 weeks, something. So it kept getting extended, and it got extended like so many times. We had to recast it a couple times. So I think Off-Broadway was my solution for the time being, while the kids are under 10,
right.
And concerts. And then the writing came, and the first thing I wrote about was being an ingenue in Finian's Rainbow. The New York Times said, "What's going on in your life?" I said, well, at that time, I said, well, nothing is going on in my life. I said, I am in my mid-40s, early mid-40s, at that time, and I just got asked to play Sharon in Finian's Rainbow. Again, I've done the play many times. I said, I'm too old now. I'm just too old to play these ingenue parts. I've been playing ingenue parts my whole... And he said, that's funny. I said, it's funny that I'm too old for my part. He goes, yeah, it's funny. Well, are you gonna take the part? I said, I don't know. He goes, well, how about you pack and unpack your mind in the New York Times and write like an essay about aging and about being an ingenue. And what is it to be young and pretty and the ingenue? She's not like the sexy character. She doesn't have the hot figure. She just has a nice waistline and a proper little breasts, but not too big, and the perfect little face. And so it's kind of it's not easy to be an ingenue. It's not like we all think we want to be the ingenue, but then it's kind of like, it's actually better to be, not better, but it's not the unusual person. It's not the person with always with the spunk and spark.
The killer. It's just a little more fun.
And it's something. It's almost like a sieve for other people's dreams, or for a man to want something that's going to be easy, And so I always was an ingenue, and I always tried to make the ingenues not that, and not just a sieve. I tried to make them smart and lively and a little sensual, and maybe even a little erotic, a little smarter than the man, so that it had a little spark that he was like, oh, look at her, isn't she something? So that I always seemed a formidable partner in the ingenue skin, And I think I did bring that. I think that's why I worked so much as an ingenue, because I did have a lot going on behind the eyes.
Yeah.
I wasn't just like a pretty face. But I had all the external attributes of the kind of conventionally pretty.
The social standards of
standards. I had the pretty, and I'm not saying that that's an asset. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that I had that look. Again, you go back to a time where this is what they wanted. There are a little more, people are now casting more unusually in the ingenue parts and stuff, but they weren't when I was coming up. So I had that advantage that I just looked the part. Put me in any dress, I looked just right. So that's what I wrote about in the New York Times, that now I'm like an aging ingenue. And how do you age? And how do you let go of that identity? I called myself the terminal ingenue. But when is it my time to start playing, feistier, more difficult people, Auntie Mames and Kiss Me Kate and maybe Desiree and Little Night Music. I actually have all the spunk and fire, So at some point, I hope I think that's starting to happen. But that's what the article was about. It was about being too old to play the ingenue and what an ingenue's future can be.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah, you've also played, such a variety. There's such a variety that you've done. I'm not even going to list the shows. There's just like so many.
Well, you're looking at this poster. You can
Yeah.
Your listeners can't see this, but there's a poster that I brought that the record label made up for Sondheim Sublime, which
Yeah.
is all the Sondheim parts that I played. And Sondheim really is the place where there is no such thing as the traditional ingenue.
Yeah.
And so for what I'm saying about feeling trapped a little bit in the body of a Sharon type character, anytime you do Sondheim, there's more layers.
Yeah.
So Sondheim was probably the seed that was growing all these years, and I just was too young and simple to understand it. And as you get older, you can understand writing like this. The first ingenue character I played for Sondheim was Sunday in the Park with George, and the pictures we're looking at here is a picture of me in my underwear, in a corset, and that she is the muse to a painter, and that's a running theme in my life is being a muse. I had a long personal relationship with the director of My Fair Lady, who was much, much older than me. I know a lot about that role in life, and I'm not saying that like I was the muse to the director of My Fair Lady, but we did fall in love. And I do know a little bit about being Dot in Sunday in the Park with George and being the painter's model and inspiring an older man, inspiring good work from them, and also finding your own value in that process.
Have any of these roles taught you the most about yourself? Or
The Sondheim roles?
Yeah.
Well, they each taught me something else. I mean, I recognized in Dot that I've always had this thing to put other people's creativity, not that I would put it above my own, but I'm actually very good at getting it and being inspired by other people. I am an interpretive artist, and I guess that all actors really are. We have to admire Shakespeare. We have to admire Janine Tesori. We have to admire Sarah Bareilles. We do.
Yeah.
We revere them, and we become their muses, or we become their worshipers. That's what an interpretive artist does. You need to understand the author. Yeah. I have started to become an author of essays about the actor's experience, but I am not the author of art, like of musicals and so on. But so in Sondheim, the first thing I recognized in playing Sunday in the Park with George was that I am naturally somebody who knows how to find the wonder in somebody else's talent. She saw it in George Seurat, but she also wanted a personal life. I didn't even know at the time how much Sunday in the Park with George was about that baby. She gets pregnant, and she doesn't have anyone to take care of that baby. And the question of, can you have a home and be artistic? That is the big question in Sunday in the Park with George. I played the part, and I don't think I thought I understood it. I understood it. I understand it now. What do you do in your 40s, when you're later 40s, and your children are getting big now, and they really are fine? Do I quit? I don't want to quit, and make myself just more and more in their audience. It's not good for them. It's important as creative people to not let the idea of domesticity just pull you and just pull you out of your own creativity. It's important for raising children to keep yourself in control of your destiny. It's good modeling for your children. But the play asks all these questions. Can you be an artist, a real obsessive artist, and have a home? Sondheim's answer is no in that. Right. George Seurat walks off, but he never forgets her. But it's a tormented show in that way. I think
many are.
Right? It's a tormented show. So that's one thing that I learned. I learned to ask the question about, can you have a personal life?
Right.
And an artistic life at the same time. And I think I'm still wrestling with that, and I'm going to be out there for your younger listeners, and I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to produce work for women, and I'm going to empower other women, and I'm going to keep publishing articles about what it feels like on the inside, to just keep giving people information and to share the mistakes I've made. And I think if you have mentors and examples, then it's possible. So I want to be one of those.
Who are your mentors?
Possible.
Do you have any, or did you?
I
have
do.
any,
Donna
or
Murphy.
changed?
Donna Murphy is someone that I admire and know pretty well. Patti LuPone. These are people who've really taken my hand. Betty Buckley.
Yeah.
They've really been kind to me. I also have intellectual mentor right now. His name is Adam Gopnik. He's a writer for the New Yorker magazine, and he's a great thinker and a great poet. And he writes musicals, but also just a very inspiring friend and person. So often sends me just inspirational ideas about, because he's a writer, about learning to write my own life. Take all these experiences that I've had and organize them. One of the things about being a creative person, and I'm sure listening to a podcast is tricky because it's like, oh, this person talks in circles. But life is circles, right? And then after you've put all that out there and you've lived, and you want to organize it into little groups.
Yeah.
And writing has been very supported by this lyricist. He's a lyricist and a book writer for musicals, but also an essayist in the New Yorker magazine. Just been very encouraging of my writing for the New York Times and for other magazines, and just going topic by topic. I wrote about misogyny in the New York Times. I wrote about the life on a Playboy cruise, what really goes on the boat. I did a long essay on that. I went out and did a cruise, and I wrote about the cruise, and I wrote a lot about what makes theater people worth, well, $14,000 a ticket, but why would you want to go out to see with a group of actors who've been on Broadway maybe 10 times, 5 times, whatever. Some have won Tonys, some haven't, but real theater stars and theater actors. Why would you want to be out in the ocean with them, isolated for 8 days? That's a good question. Well, when I went out on the boat, I realized that people wanted our glamour. Yes, they wanted a glamorous night, but they wanted to hear about our failures. They wanted to hear about the nights that, somebody was out there with a broken arm and had to get through Pippin, and somebody fell down the stairs as Auntie Mame. They wanted to hear about the heartbreaking disappointments that we'd been through on Broadway. They wanted to hear that High Society was a big hit in San Francisco for me, but did not succeed in New York, and it caused terrible depression for me. And people wanted those stories. And we had these chatterbox things with Seth Rudetsky, where we talked about our feelings and we talked about the ups and downs. That's what the audience likes, is our vulnerability. Theater stars are more vulnerable than television and film stars. There's something built into it. And so what I said was that what floated that boat were not as much our triumphs as our failures in a sense. And I used the metaphor that there's many shipwrecks out in the Caribbean where we were swimming and we had to swim and do things and activities with the guests. Yeah. But shipwreck is a very common structure under the sea, this around which all this coral and fish and color grows. And we literally, in the same way, the shipwrecks of the theater, the shipwrecks of our life experience.
So much life that grows around it.
So much life and humor and resilience grows.
Yeah.
We get great stories out of our failures.
Yes, we do.
I lost my 12 inches of hair. Yeah. I mean, that's the best story I have. And that was the biggest failure. It was so depressing. But we are very resilient people. And that's theater performers. And the resilience is the theme of all of my writing for the New York Times. Even the self-tape article. Who else on earth would be as resilient and as brave and as generous as us, that we turn the camera on ourselves and share who we are and then email it to somebody? I admire my peers. So I think that resilience is my theme. Yeah. And I think that it's what I have to reinforce in younger people who seem to sometimes be idealistic and then get immediately depressed when things don't work out. They need to become more resilient. They need to just keep picking themselves back up. They have to expect flexibility is the most important asset that they have. Oh my God, yeah. Flexibility, much more than having a vision of what they want and either getting it or not getting it.
Yeah, because it's not solid. You can't have a solid state.
No, you got to enjoy flux. You got to be a surfer girl. You got to be a surfer girl. You got to go up and down. You got to learn to balance the surfboard of life.
Yeah.
That's the surfer girl.
Do you have
By the way, we didn't finish all these plays, but that's okay.
Let's hop.
I don't know if anybody's going to be keeping an outline, but you did ask me what I'd learned from Sondheim.
Yes.
So the other two things I learned, and then I could literally do it in a sentence, but in case there's someone who's keeping score. The other musical I did was Passion.
Yes.
The big question in Passion was, where does passion lie in your life? She's married. She has a child. She has her domestic Clara, this is.
Yeah.
She has her domestic responsibilities, but she's fitting her lover in to one single room for 1 hour appointments. And eventually Giorgio gives up on her and he wants to be loved fully. And he goes for Fosco's crazy love because she gives him everything. Yeah. She gives him everything, and then she basically has an orgasm and dies at the end. Sondheim says the musical begins with an orgasm and ends with an orgasm.
And there it is.
The first one was mine. The second one was for Fosca, which is the great Donna Murphy's role, or played beautifully by Judy Kuhn. So Clara and Fosca and Giorgio are really making us wonder why we love people. Do we love people? Do we get confused by their beauty? Do we love people because they're available? Do we love people because they give us all of themselves and worship us? It's kind of gross, actually, what Fosca offered. But she offered all of herself to destroy herself. But, I'm the advocate for my own character, so I'm going to put her down. And I'm going to advocate for Clara, who gave him everything, but she couldn't give him all her days and all her time because she had a family. Giorgio judged that ultimately and said it wasn't enough and broke her to pieces. Actually broke me too. I had a really profound experience being in Passion. But those are the questions of Passion. So people can think about that as they like. The only other Sondheim part, 100% that I've played, other than all of the fantasies I've had through making my album last year, where I played all the characters and Phyllis and all the different people and Follies and a little night music and Petra and Desiree. I have played Leona in Do I Hear a Waltz? And Leona was a young middle-aged person who'd never taken care of herself and had any freedom, and she went to Venice on a holiday. And she had an idea about love being absolutely 100%. Everything had to be 100%. She did fall in love with someone, but when she found out that he was married and that there were those constraints, she was broken to pieces. Yeah. And he said to her, we have to take the moment and live it now. And that's the whole idea is, do we accept happiness that's imperfect? Sometimes we think we have to. And Leona never learned that. She wanted everything to be perfect, and she threw him out, and she said goodbye at the end. She wasn't able to enjoy half a man. He offered her everything, but he couldn't. He was also a married person. It's a thematic maybe for Sondheim, but is finding satisfaction in an imperfect situation.
Yeah. How did you keep your composure? Before and after shows of doing. I mean, because you can lose yourself in this kind of thing.
I don't think Sondheim is survivable. I think that you have to be really.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
I don't think so. Let's just flip this over. I'm going to turn the poster upside down so we can't see. The poster has all these different pictures of me on it. So yeah, I think. So now we're looking at a piece of white paper, which is blank. There it is. A blank canvas.
All right.
And that's how Sunday in the Park begins, or ends. Ends, I think is the final word. Oh my God, somebody's going to yell at me so badly when this airs.
It's okay.
Right. A blank canvas. So many possibilities. Yeah. I think that's the end of the show. Yeah, that's the end of the show. So anyway, how do you survive it? You don't survive Sondheim. You can't. It's so dense with contradiction. Contradiction, he has said, is mother's milk to him. There is no contradiction in contradiction. Life is constantly
contradicting itself.
It's black and white simultaneously. Yeah. It's no gray. And it's learning to understand that we all have contradictory desires. We are all sorry, grateful, all the time. that song.
Yeah.
That's his life, is the living in contradiction. And if you embrace that, you find a lot of vitality, according to him. Someone like Michel Legrand would maybe be the balm for the soul, because Michel Legrand is not stressed out at all. He's European. He did work with James Lapine, so that's the kind of the hinge for me creatively, is that there was the same director who worked with Sondheim, worked with Michel Legrand, brought me into Michel Legrand's world. But Michel Legrand comes from a different psychology. Yes, it's the psychology of jazz, classical music, movies. It's not so New York. It's not so neurotic. It's not so story-oriented.
Yeah.
Michel Legrand doesn't really care so much about like logic. It's feeling. It's sound. So when you sing his music, there's no arc to the story exactly. You can make one, and I often do, but it's emotion. It's almost like modern dance in a way. It's like, it doesn't have to have a set answer. Yeah. So when you work with someone like Michel Legrand, you find yourself relaxing in some ways and dealing with great, great melodic complexity. But it's like the opposite of the New York nervous writer of Sondheim. It's a European, sensual, affirmative, emotional, forward-moving, beautiful music. And it can be fraught, it can be heartbroken, it can be crushed, it can be a lot of things. But there's a different kind of European sensibility. So in some ways, I'm on a new vacation. It's like being dropped on a Greek island or something, and seeing the world as beautiful and noticing sunsets and time to yourself. And there's something very sensual and escapist about the new album I'm putting out and the music I'm doing. The words are more poetical, and simple in some ways.
What's most important to you in life? Is that ever changing?
What's most important to me in life is well, there's a bunch of words came to mind. Activity is very important to me. I love being active.
Yeah.
But I'm very communal. I would never do anything creative that hurt other people or that I guess I'm a natural theater person insofar as I loved being in a theater company.
Yeah.
I actually like creating groups. I like being creative, but I like doing it together.
The sense of that community.
Yeah. I recreate that in my concerts. Making my Michel Legrand album, I have a producer, a pianist, a bass player, a drummer, an engineer, a co-writer, a designer. There's all the people at Warner Music that we're working with. We have a filmmaker who makes the videos. We have Jenny Anderson, the amazing photographer, taking pictures. And it's a whole team effort. We have a social media person. But all together, we're making these interesting little promotions on Instagram. So we've made a world. And it's like a theater company. When you can't be in a theater company, I think it's really good to create collectives. Creative collectives. I would really advise everybody, if they have a acting class they like taking, or if they have a group of people, I don't care if it's a reading club. If you have nothing to do, get together, read scripts, create creative circles. And creating creative circles is probably my greatest value, life value. And I do it in my home too. I like to have creativity, creative things happen. My kids play ukulele and piano and guitar, as well as their dancers. I like the idea of not a commune, but I like working creatively in teams, and I really encourage any creative grouping that you can create. I think that something will come. If you want to make a video, get someone interested in it. Loop a friend in, or get a composer writing something. Or if you want to write lyrics, try it. And if you don't play the guitar that well, either be really bad or get somebody to play some chords with you. And I don't know. I like the idea of working in teams, even if it seems as simplistic as what I'm describing, as like two bad musicians getting together making music. It's actually really important to make to make, let's say if you're an essayist, so when I'm writing, now for the pretty prominent, places,
Yes.
I write a C paper and I edit it to an A.
Okay.
You got to write.
You don't even think? Or you do think,
You just
but
have
you just
to
do
it.
You just do.
You have to do it.
Yeah.
It's doing, So when I say my initial thought when you said, what's your biggest value? It was like activity. It's like you have to keep doing. It's very easy to get blocked. In the 90s, before there was all these podcasts and which are of course wonderful, but you couldn't get information.
No.
There was, and advice. There was this book called The Artist's Way.
Yeah.
I mean, literally,
Yeah.
I used to do it with friends and stuff,
Yeah.
just to
It's
get
a
out.
workbook.
Yeah, it's kind of like a workbook. So I guess working in creative groups for me is one of my my biggest values. Did you ask me if it was my value or
Important to you in life.
yeah, what was important to me in life? Yeah, working in teams. My family I perceive as a team.
Of course. Yeah.
Team McEnroe, we call it.
Hey.
I'm married to Patrick McEnroe, a tennis player. I married a pro athlete who I met when I was 5, and he went on to be on TV, and I saw him at Wimbledon. I saw him on, at some matches and things, and I thought, oh, I grew up with him. We were in nursery school together, and he was my older brother's best friend, and his mom saw me in My Fair Lady, and she set us up.
No.
Totally.
way.
This is an arranged marriage, like in Pakistan or something.
Oh
So she set us up, and I was 25, and we got married really quickly. So I've been married a really long time, which is not very traditional, to get married young and to stay. So I'm a tennis wife as well as everything else. Patrick McEnroe is his name.
Yeah.
And he is the younger brother, the youngest of 3. And his eldest brother is the most famous tennis player, among the most famous athletes in history, John McEnroe. And people ask me constantly for tickets. So
Oh, Lord.
they'll be writing to you saying,
And have you gotten-
she was great, but can I have tickets?
You got better at saying no? Or no?
No, I have a couple. There's a couple of ways in which I handle this, but
Okay.
people have to come and ask me. But
Yeah. That's the way you get
people
the
are always asking me if I play tennis, and I said I did a lot when we were dating. That was definitely
For him. No.
yeah. We were dating, and
Yeah.
less now. We have one tennis playing daughter, and
Yeah.
no, but he's amazing. So I was in London last week. I was singing at Royal Festival Hall, so that would be actually it was longer than last week. It was September 20th, and he was in Geneva at the Laver Cup. He's the coach and captain with his brother John of the Laver Cup. These are huge events. May not mean much to the theater community, but this is massive events, like Super Bowl size.
Yeah.
And my husband was the American coach and captain with his brother. And I was doing the Michel Legrand Memorial in London, and then we met in Europe and took a couple of days, which is unusual. So sometimes our lives will be fancy like that, where I'll be doing a concert and he'll be doing an amazing sporting event.
And then you're back in the city.
And then I'm back. So this is what at the moment, this is where I'm working my Broadway skills. I get every single show that I do. I've noticed that now that I see myself as a more independent artist, making my own work
Yeah.
a little bit more than being in a play on Broadway, which I would love to do again when the time is right. But I'm out there singing the songs I want to sing in beautiful clothes, telling stories people love to hear and have never heard before, whether it's about Sondheim or and I like to give people a new view on music. And the way you set a song up can change the way they hear it. And I love being a concert singer because it's an opportunity for me to show that I'm a thinking actress and that, I went to Yale and I studied literature and history, and I have a strong value about beautiful writing and words, and the great wordsmiths that gave us all the great classic songs that I sing. So I always have something to say. I always script something, and we have a lot of fun in the concerts. So I've liked getting out there and making music as my personal theater at the moment.
Yeah.
And the writing too. I've made it like my own personal theater at this chapter,
Yeah.
you know, and maybe I'll go back to the normal chapter of being a part of a theater company on Broadway and just hoof it and do
On
it.
someone else's schedule.
Yeah,
instead
and
of
be
making
on
your
someone
own.
else's schedule. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm happy for that.
Yeah.
I'm happy for that. But at the moment, I'm actually on somebody else's schedule, which
Yeah.
is my family.
Yeah.
You know, like we're not always the first and number one most important person in the world. And sometimes you have to say, okay, I'm not. Let's say you have a parent who's sick or somebody else needs you. Well, we all have to adjust, and we have to be kind with each other. You know, I noticed a tweet the other day by Jane Monheit, a terrific jazz singer, and she says, please stop talking about my weight. Don't say it. Don't say I look better. Don't say I didn't used to look good. Don't say I'm looking good. I don't want to hear a compliment, and I don't want to hear a negative. We never know what people are going through, you know?
No.
And this is what I'm going through right now. I'm raising a family. I've never stopped loving theater. I mean, loving it to my core. I never quit. I have a family to raise. I've had health things. Like I had a tumor a couple of years ago. It was publicized. And, you know, that's where Sondheim Sublime came from. I was very humbled. I was nervous. I saw Marin Maisie had died, you know, and I had a tumor and an ovary. And I was thinking, fuck, you know, can you say that on a podcast?
It's an adult program.
Yeah. I was thinking,
good.
gosh, you know, what have I learned 30 years as an actress, doing Broadway and all my dreams and hopes and ups and downs and beautiful, wonderful things and people I've loved, and then LA and values. What have I learned? And I decided to use Stephen Sondheim's music. And that's why it's called Sondheim's Sublime. It's because if I had to write a letter, if I were to have to let go of this life on this earth, in this manifestation, what would I leave behind for you and all your listeners and people who love? I decided to look for the wisdom in Sondheim, the empathy in Sondheim, the clarity in his confusing but really profound songs. And that's where Sondheim's Sublime came from. So people can be like, oh, Sondheim's Sublime, it sounds kind of like, ooh, Melissa, like she's so smart or whatever. Sublime, the sublimity, you know, like art history, whatever. It's not that. It's like, I'm just a person, and I was scared, and I'm a woman, and I'm not a unsensual woman, and I thought, oh God, I would love to leave the sensual songs behind about love and choices and children and birth and marriage. And I sang Children and Art, and I sang With So Little to Be Sure Of from the bottom of my heart. And I sang Move On, and I sang Sooner or Later, you know, which is a great seduction song. And I sang Loving You from Passion, you know, the show I barely survived. So I wanted to leave something beautiful that felt like Melissa behind. I don't know we never know who we are, right?
Right.
And we're not artists that make our own stuff, unless we're Sarah Bareilles or Lin-Manuel, but even then he's now in Mary Poppins and he's in different things. We're interpreting other people's work.
Yes.
We're actors. So we have to find who we are through other people.
Yeah.
Right? Through the teams and the groups that we join, the theater. What do we add? Not always easy. I'm not always easy because I ask questions or because I'm so emotionally available. There are some people who just clock in a Broadway show or are really good at just being witty and just do their thing and go home. But I was never asked to be that person. I was asked to be the ingenue who cared, who loved him, who looked at his face and his lips and wanted him and sang about how much I want him. I don't want to I can't clock in that performance.
You can't turn it on and off.
You can't turn that on and off. That's a softness. And I had that softness. So now I'm older. How do I keep that theater quality alive? And I'm doing it interpreting Sondheim. Now I'm interpreting again Michel Legrand because he did just die. I was asked by the New York Times to write his obituary, which I did lovingly. And I've gone back to being his muse at the moment. I've done everything to put him first in this record. I made an album with him about not even 10 years ago with a symphony, and it's the most beautiful record. But now I'm giving everybody 12 new songs. The demos of him and me playing in my living room. The demos that we made, you can literally hear him playing the piano with Steve Gadd, who was, you know, did some of the most famous jazz riffs in the world with the greatest drummers in history. I had to call Steve Gadd. I can't afford Steve Gadd. I said, Steve, I'm going to put out those demos you did. He says, good luck with it. I said, I mean, he knows I can't even afford him. He just gave it to me for free.
Yeah.
So the demos have these legends on it. So I have 5 or 6 demos. I have the home demos with Michel, and I have the last song he ever wrote before he died. The Bergmans gave it to me, and I recorded it. So that's going to be that's the 3rd single that was out on November 1st. But so Michel Legrand's last song he ever wrote. And I've done everything I can to be selfless in this record, to find the Melissa in it, but also to put Michel Legrand 100% in back in people's hearts and minds. I think people, real singers, all sopranos, mid-sopranos, even belters, are going to love to hear these melodies. You know, you can use them for auditions. And
they're lesser known to this generation.
They're lesser known, but they're gorgeous.
Just because of what people are picking these
They're
days.
going to come back. They're going to come back.
Yeah.
They're going to come back. You know, when something is real, like Tony Bennett said to me, only sing the good songs. That was his advice to me. Just remember, only sing the good songs. And these are among the good songs. These are the standards of our time. This man, though he's French, he is in the Great American Songbook. Yeah. So I've gone back to being a muse. I've gone back to being Dot in Sunday in the Park with George. I have my God now is Michel Legrand. But I think I know who Melissa is in all of that. That's been, you know, that's a journey for someone who's naturally, maybe a natural muse. So this is my latest project, and that's how I've been living my life, like making my own work at the moment until another musical comes along, and I will then serve.
Those are the trends these days. Make your own work.
Make your own stuff. Make your own work. Yeah. I do think you're right, and I think that's one of the reasons why I am saying.
That's why I started this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a trend.
Yeah.
It seems to be the way to go. Do you have books, favorite books, most gifted books? Books you refer to frequently, or texts you refer to often? Or
I have favorite books. I mean, right now I'm reading Voltaire in Love, which is an amazing book. And I just read Lillian Ross's book, Picture. It's an amazing book about Hollywood by Lillian Ross. And what I love about that book is it shows the course from it's Angelica Houston's father. John Huston was a great independent filmmaker, and it charts the creation of one of his movies, and it lets you see how a movie gets made from its idea all the way to the end, and all the people that muddle it up, all the marketing people and the poster and the casting, and you watch the idea and you watch all the crowding that comes in. There's so many people between us and our creativity and our dream,
and our audience,
and then the audience. But then by the time that movie got to, that was the Red Badge of Courage, that particular film. By the time it was seen, it had nothing to do with what it was when it started. It was based on this book, but they had they had an idea of the movie they wanted to make, and they never made that movie. They did make it, but then it got re-edited and changed. It was a reshot, and it's so interesting. How do we protect ourselves, our initial ideas? Because the process of making art involves so many other people. Collaboration, and then media, and then salesmanship, and then ticket sales, and then and hopefully by the time you're presenting your work, by the time it's your Hamilton or something, or it doesn't have to make it that big, but by the time it's on your stage, whatever your stage is, hopefully it reflects the initial idea that was yours, because then you can live with yourself, right? If it feels like you and it's out there, then it's good. Then it's your gold. It doesn't have to succeed in every way for everyone, but if it's your gold and it's still up on that stage by the time you get it done, you've succeeded. And a book like that makes me, it stays with me. How do you keep your initial, the kernel of truth and the idea you initially had as you try to get out there? How do you keep it How do you
All the way to the
protect
end.
it all the way to the end?
Yeah.
So a book like that. And then you had asked me if I had a quote that
Yeah.
I love.
Yeah, as we wrap up, Billboard
But I'm gonna.
quote.
Here's my favorite quote is by a French poet, and I'm gonna keep it French because of my Michel Legrand project, which we are celebrating at this moment. This is my current theater, the Theater of France.
Yeah.
So there is a quote by the French poet Valéry. It was translated by W.H. Auden, and the quote is: "A poem is never finished, only abandoned." And he contrasts it actually in his book with the sort of opposite aphorism, which is, when a poem comes right, it comes right with a definitive click, like a jewel box closing. So what he's really saying is that we're always torn in our work between the two truths. The one truth that work is never finished, and the other truth that we know when it's finished with a decisive click of certainty. And I think both apply in our life. Like sometimes it's not finished. It doesn't feel finished. We never feel finished.
But it's
And
time to move on.
But it's
Yeah.
time to move on. And other times you do know that it's finished, and you hear that click, when that other side of it. When a poem comes right, it comes right with a definitive click, like a jewel box closing. So sometimes you do hear that click, and other times you don't hear that click. But we live torn between those two things, as creative artists, and it's okay. Both can apply.
Yeah. With flexibility.
Yeah, both can apply.
Flexibility.
Sometimes you're going to hear the click. Sometimes it's unfinished.
Yeah.
And so the initial quote there was, "A poem is never finished, only abandoned," and that's by one of the great poets in the world.
Yeah.
You finish it, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of feel that the first one is kind of what this feels like. But we could
The
go
work
on.
you do.
We
Of
could
course
keep
the
going
work
on with
you
our
do.
conversation,
well, of
though.
course,
It's like
because
we
my
just
life goes on,
we
and
just
you're going to
end
have
it.
new guests, and you're an
Yeah.
amazing and interested person. You like people.
Yeah,
I can see
yeah.
it in your eyes.
Yeah.
You like people. That's why you're doing what you're doing. So there'll be other people on this tape tomorrow.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thanks for sharing all of this.
Thank you, everyone. I hope I made some sense.
You did.
Bye.
Legrand Affair.
That's right.
November 8th. Check it out. Links, everything, all of it's in the bio. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap on up?
No, it's Legrand Affair Deluxe Edition.
It's a deluxe
It's
edition.
new because it's a reissue with all sorts of new dreamy material, and it's my latest muse. So I'll keep writing, I'll keep doing, and I'll see you all out there.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Melissa Errico.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.